Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Redmond Magazine Vendor Spotlight podcast, Putting Knowledge to Work, How Applied AI Enables Collaboration. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief in the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be talking today with Mark Holman, Chief Strategy Officer at Intapp, a leading global provider of cloud-based solutions for professional and financial services. Hey, Mark.
Hello.
Today's discussion is about the impact of the still evolving work from anywhere environment on a market segment that relies entirely on relationships, information, and knowledge. I'm talking about accounting, consulting, investment banking, private capital in both in-house legal and standalone law firms. But this topic could apply, virtually any info knowledge aspect of any enterprise that found itself about 3 years ago faced with an urgent need for effective collaboration tools in environments rife with information silos. Now, that was a mouthful, but it explains why I'm talking to Mark today. Mark Holman has served as Chief Strategy Officer at Intapp since 2019. Before that, he was President of Strategy, Investments, and Marketing for a tech design and manufacturing firm called Flex. And you were also partner at A.T. Kearney and PwC, and a founding CEO of E2Open, a SaaS supply chain software company, if I've got that right. And yeah. I understand, as we've talked before, a recovering triathlete.
I say lapsed triathlete because I feel like during the pandemic, I didn't quite get out as much as I wanted to, and it's time to get back out there.
Well, good for you. That's awesome. So, all right, let's just get going with this is your bailiwick. What is it about this market segment that keeps you involved?
It's you walk through the resume there, which has been eclectic, would be probably a kind way of saying it. But I started in consulting 30 years ago with a firm that's no longer existent, Booz Allen in Hamilton, which eventually got merged into PwC, which was another stop on my journey. And I've been in and around both professional services, private equity, M&A, and all of this throughout my career in various ways on one side or the other of being involved in that. And when the opportunity to work with Intapp came 4 years ago, it felt to me like a capstone of the things I've spent my entire career on, both understanding how software companies operate, and then this transformation that is underway in professional services. It's been one of the laggards in the economy on productivity, partly because it's such a hard knowledge relationship-based business. And I looked at this and I said, there's a opportunity here to be part of really a transformation in this industry that is I would never have predicted what's happened the last couple of years, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, that really has accelerated, I would say, some of this transformation. So for me personally, I love being around transformation of industries. That's why I got into consulting 30 years ago. And this industry in particular has a great opportunity out of it.
That's I can see that the fascination is sort of inherent in the sort of the not collision, but the integration of the demands of the marketplace with the evolution of the technologies. And the pandemic sort of accelerated all that. We're past the initial shock of the lockdown, during which many financial and professional services organizations turned to the deeply established Microsoft Teams and SharePoint solutions to do for all of their collaboration needs. Not to put too fine a point on it, how did that work out?
I think it's a tale of two cities almost. There's the amazing resilience of humans that we all saw, where we adapted quickly. After we got over the shock and transformation, I've heard many CIOs and others in the industry talk about the fact that we jammed 10 years of change management into 10 days. And,
Amazing.
In professional services, you've got vast different generations of folks that participate. You've got the old experienced partners that frankly would never have imagined chatting on video. Just would never in their lifetime have thought about that. And you've got the younger professionals who've grown up with technology. But we went into this pandemic and I give enormous credit to the CIOs in this industry. They had to change on a dime, and they had to help their teams get ready to move on to things like Teams and SharePoint in a much more advanced way. They were ready in their own way. They've been advocating for these tools and technology for a decade. That the capability was there, and then they raced into it. And I would say that's the good. I mean, like we changed overnight, and we had to. It was a forced adoption, and we're humans and more resilient than we sometimes realize in our ability to go do that. Now, that said, it was like everybody just raced in. And when I talk with a lot of the leaders in the industry, they're like, okay, I got to the first level. You and I were chatting about this. People call it purple Skype Teams, right? They're doing video chatting, but they haven't really exploited the full capability of the platform for truly co-authoring and being able to really get their teams all in one place and the way they work. And frankly, in our industry, often they're working with their clients, other partners in the industry. How do you get everybody on the same page? There's still a lot of work to be done there. There's a lot of learning and governance and education. How do we make it easier for people to adapt these tools? And I think that's the way we're working through now is, hey, now that we're comfortable working with these tools, how do we embrace them? And there is this generational, the more senior seasoned partners are quite different than the 23-year-olds that are entering into these firms that are quite ready to adopt new tools and technology.
So if what you're saying is we've got full-on cultural challenges, to the, adoption of these tools. But we also have tech challenges as well, as everybody puts everything into Teams, and finds it, highly capable, but maybe not all it could be. Is that what you found when you looked at all this stuff?
Absolutely. You'll hear a lot of people talking about team sprawl.
Sprawl.
They'll open up and they'll look at the sidebar of all of the channels they're invited to, and they're like, I know this document's in here somewhere. I can't remember if it was in the chat on the M&A deal or the chat on the legal team, or it was the chat, and so they're did I store it on my hard drive? Is it on SharePoint? Is it in the Teams folder? Which folder is it in? And I do think that that is a enormous opportunity for us to help them do that. And we'll talk about AI later. I actually think AI is another part of the answer here of how do I discover the things I already know within the environment that I'm in. But I do think this has been one of the biggest challenges is we raced into it so quickly. We didn't give people rules for the road. Very few firms were ready with hey, here's actually how to structure all this. Here's actually how to organize that. And frankly, out of the box teams need some help, if you want to say, to make that work perfectly for the environments that we operate in. And then if I had to add another challenge to it, rightfully, these firms that we work with are hyper worried about security, privacy. They're usually in possession of some of the most important intellectual capital of their clients, an M&A deal that's happening, the strategy for the company, the unaudited financials that haven't been released yet. I mean, the kind of information that these firms manage is market moving information that rightfully they're worried about getting in the wrong hands. Well, as a result of that, they tend to be less open to how do I use collaborative sharing if I'm not sure about the security of that environment. I'm not sure that we don't accidentally invite the wrong client to the team room where that information may reside, which would be a disaster. And so I think the challenge for these firms is how do I make sure now I move to a secure sharing? They all want to do it. I've got one of the partners we work with that I use for work that's one of the big four firms, and they won't yet let their teams share using Teams with their clients because they're just not sure they can control the environment yet. It's not that Teams isn't capable of it. They just haven't figured out the governance and process to make that happen. And I think this is an interesting challenge that's somewhat, I don't want to say entirely unique to the industries we serve, but is really pronounced in the industries that we serve.
And so it's not merely just providing them with the technology, but providing them with, in some way you have to convince them or demonstrate that this thing that's their lifeblood, this information is safe.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's...
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and especially in a world that is being bombarded by, ransomware attacks and, highly publicized breaches, I can imagine that that people who are who are responsible for this information are a little skittish.
Absolutely. I mean, one failure on the security front, one failure on the data privacy front, and their organizational reputations are at risk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody wants to work with the audit firm who let everybody's financials out. Nobody wants to work with the investment bank where the merger deal was hacked into and everybody knew it before it was announced. So rightfully, these firms are concerned about this. I do think it is a combination of how do you give better tools and technology to make that easy? As an example, we have a product we call Walls that allows you to wall off information within an enterprise. Historically, many firms relied on the trust of the individuals and the partners to manage that confidentiality within their own firm. But there are ways we can offer them tools and technology to make that better. We work, Microsoft is obviously big partner. They are probably, if not the highest, most capable security firm on the planet. They have, I think, a $15 billion security firm under the covers of Microsoft. And so it's not that the technology isn't secure. It's the overlays of how you use that technology. It's how do you make it work within that enterprise? And then to your point, the governance and management of that I think keeps the leaders of these firms and the CIOs up at night, making sure that they can do this. But the demands are their professionals want to be able to work more collaboratively across organizational boundaries. And so that's the challenge for them. They've got to find a way to go do this.
So this is fascinating. So you've got a product called Walls. I mean, we're talking about security and confidentiality. That's absolutely critical. You've got, like you say, CIOs up at night. How does that work? How do you compartmentalize, he tried to say, work that makes sure the information remains secure?
Well, at a technical level, our Walls product lives within the application environment of our clients and has fine-grained permissioning so that if somebody is on the Coke team, they can't see the Pepsi documents. And you've got to create the actual governance models. Everyone knows the Coke and Pepsi. Usually people understand that one. It's the Coke versus Verner's one. I'm a Detroit native originally, for those that understand what Verner's is. That's the more likely people will forget to do. But what we've been building is a very rich permissioning system. And again, this is one of those things that we've had to do it because the professional service market thinks this way, that all of these professionals are working on different confidential information for different clients to be able to have fine-grained the ability to, when you onboard, say, a new client, to be able to automatically enforce, it's Verner's, we need to make sure the Pepsi people don't see the information. And to be able to enforce that, you've got to have a good data model that works, that thinks through things like the role of a client, the role of a project team, and the role of the individuals within that in order to go do that, which is partly why, as we'll talk about what Intapp's all about, the market we serve kind of has these unique needs where you think about the roles of the different individuals around how they manage information. And therefore you build the permissioning and governance around all of that to enforce those rules. It's geeky-ish. I guess as geeky as professional and financial services gets, but it's really down in the data model of understanding how these people, what roles they play in the information that you want to manage around them.
Fascinating. So maybe before we get to talking about Intapp, so Microsoft, big partner for you guys. You've got unifying platform and all that, which we'll talk about in a second. But Microsoft is a fantastic supporter of developers. Like you say, they've got a massive security apparatus within. How did they, when the pandemic hit, how well did they provide for the collaboration needs of the market? How did they do? And it's a little bit like what I asked earlier, but maybe with a little twist.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I'm 30 years now in Silicon Valley, and if I had to be frank with people, I would say in Silicon Valley for many years we would talk about Microsoft as they'll win the market eventually, but they're going to be slow, and it'll take them 3 versions before they get to a usable version. And this was kind of the reputation and mindset, I would say, most people in Silicon Valley through most of my career development thought of Microsoft. I frankly think that the post-Satya era of Microsoft, it's a different company. And, even, when the pandemic hit, most people, if you were to poll them, would say, which do you prefer, Zoom or Teams? Just for the video, the purple Skype thing that we talked about earlier. And I think they would mostly say Zoom, to be very, very honest. Yeah. But the pace at which Microsoft innovated was a different Microsoft. And it was remarkable to see how quickly they innovated. And frankly, within Intapp, we were using both Zoom and Teams. And in the early days of the pandemic, it was probably a 8-to-1 ratio of people who preferred one over the other, as you might imagine. Everyone's come around to the point and said, yeah, there's a couple things that Zoom might be better at, but there's so many more things that Teams is better at. And the holistic experience on Teams as a platform in terms of integration with Outlook and being able to manage documents and the co-authoring capabilities and being able to capture, transcripts while you're in the middle of a meeting. And we'll talk later about, where ChatGPT is going to take all this. They, I think, have turned into an extraordinarily nimble company that actually has a really good sense for the market and is moving at a pace that nobody would have imagined. In fact, some of those companies that we used to think of as the fast movers, like the Googles of the world, frankly, look slow now. And I would never have thought we would say that 5 years ago, to be very frank with you.
We're living in a time of great change. So we talked a little bit about what your company provides, but maybe just let the folks know, talk about Intapp. Tell us about your company.
Yeah, we're founded on a reasonably simple premise, which is there's a market in what we would call professional and financial services that is unique enough that it needs its own software for running the firm and helping the professionals in the firm be able to do their roles better. The firms that we serve tend to be as you mentioned earlier, the law firms, the accounting firms, the consulting firms, the investment banks, the private equity funds. They're all partnership structures for the most part. They don't deliver any physical goods. I don't deliver, the firms in this industry don't deliver a car to somebody or a new toy or anything like that. It's all intellectual capital and PowerPoint and documents and things like that. And our belief was that they had unique needs. We were talking about a number of those earlier in terms of confidentiality needs, information management needs, the way they go about selling their services in the market. It's not a hierarchical sales force. It's a network team of partners that are working, and they're selling on the basis of their capabilities and prior experiences and the experiences and capabilities of the firm. So our belief was it was a different business. And so when the founders started the company here in Palo Alto about 20 years ago, they thought, okay, this market could be something unique and different. And so from that beginning in 2000, we've now gotten to the point now where we serve over 2,000 of the most prestigious firms on the planet. So if you were to name the top 10 accounting firms, the top 10 consulting firms, the top 10 law firms, they're all clients of Intapp. And what we offer is what we would call a vertical SaaS capability. It's everything from client acquisition to the risk and compliance capabilities we were talking about before. We provide a collaboration content layer on top of Microsoft Teams to help make it work better for these professionals and really help them run their firm better and help their professionals do their jobs better. We're about $300 million in revenues today. We went public a couple of years ago in a kind of a crazy up and down period. And 2 years later after our IPO, we're the best performing IPO of our class, which is kind of exciting. And it's just a testament of a very resilient market. And we're deeply partnered with Microsoft. We are all in on Azure. We're building products and solutions with them. And in our markets, Microsoft is, the system of choice for productivity, for cloud hosting and everything else. And so it was very natural for us to go really deep with Microsoft as we've built Intapp to the next level.
Fascinating. And they're, of course, have a great reputation for working closely with partners. Okay, to call the changes the enterprise faced during the lockdown seismic shift would be an understatement. But since then, there's been another ground shaker, the surge of interest in generative AI, thanks to the release of GPT-4, with the primary focus on in the mainstream press on Chat GPT. Microsoft is probably the largest investor in OpenAI. I think it is the largest investor, $10 billion.
They are now. Yep.
Yep. And the company has been integrating generative AI into its web browser, search engine, and dev tools. But your company has been working with foundational AI for years. This is, we got a new hot trend now, but you guys have been in this space integrating this, a version of this technology into your solutions for ages. Talk about, like maybe give us a quick, so we know what generative AI is, I think, but talk about what foundational AI is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the concept of artificial intelligence and the capabilities been, decades actually in the development. Yeah. And so it's kind of fun to see, my 85-year-old mom probably knows what Chat GPT is. And maybe is using it to discover better baking recipes and things like that, which, has made, I think, artificial intelligence, I'll say consumerly popular because
Yep.
people get it now. But as you point out, AI has been foundational. We started working with AI probably 12, 15 years ago. And really what we think about is we call it applied AI. It's using the concepts of machine learning and artificial intelligence to look across large data sets and be able to derive information meaning out of that. Now, in our case, it's things that may seem relatively mundane, but actually in our market are quite valuable because the professionals in our market, one of the things that they value greatly is their time. In fact, they charge for their time for the most part. and what they don't like doing is things like entering data into systems. They don't like searching for information in data. They don't like having to sort through a bunch of things. So I'll give you a couple of examples where we started working with AI quite a while back. So one of our products allows a lawyer to enter their time. Task every lawyer has to do. They bill in 6-minute increments, and they need to every day record all of their time. Historically, that's an extraordinarily manual process. You enter in your entries and you say it's client ABC, and you hopefully remember everything you did that day and you capture all the time. And a lot of lawyers would have a little yellow pad on their desk next to them. They would literally, as their day goes down, they would be writing all this stuff that nobody likes to do. It's not the fun part of the job, but they got to do it because they got to get paid for what they're doing. Well, we've created, using machine learning, the ability to look across all the work that they're doing. And we can see, when you're in documents, when you're in a Teams chat, when you're on a phone call, when you're working on a document. And we present back to the lawyer, here's how I think you spent your time. Now, it doesn't necessarily get to everything. Now, we call it zero entry. That's our goal, is like never have to enter anything. That's the true north for us, is zero entry. But what we're getting to, frankly speaking, is on the journey to zero entry is a lot lower entry as we get there. So if I can present to the lawyer, here's how I think you spent your time today. They could look at it and go, oh, you got it 98% right. Let me correct these 2 entries, and boom, I put my time into the system. We did a study actually with some accountants, and we asked them, when do you put your time into the system and how long does it take you? And vast majority of these young auditors were spending their Saturday mornings entering their time into the system. I guarantee you no 23-year-old wants to spend their Saturday morning entering time into a time system. With our capability, it happens over the course of the week, and their Saturday mornings, they're off for a hike. They're not entering time. So that's a simple example where we're using that. Now, what we're aiming toward is things like, how do I draw meaning out of documents? We have some simple form of this today. Somebody puts in a document that in the legal industry, you need to, and your clients give you a document that tells you how you need to, the rules of the road of how you work with them. Comes in a Word doc and all that. We take NLP and AI and pull out of that unstructured data and turn it into a structure that they can then use. Oh, don't bill time after 5 o'clock. Don't bill time on your car ride into the office, et cetera, et cetera. So we could take that unstructured information and pull it into structure. Where I hope we are getting to, which with generative AI, which is showing people, how do I pull knowledge and meaning out of systems? How do I make it, people talk about citizen developers, in terms of how you think about technology, like, oh, I can make anybody connect applications, go do different things. I think we're going to see an era now of the citizen user of AI, because everybody can easily, we all have played with ChatGPT, and you can go do just about anything with it. And if you can put that on top of an enterprise application and say, who in our firm knows something about oil and gas and lease payments and how to structure the tax return for that, and give me 5 examples, that if you were to query most companies, say, how do you find that information? I do 5 phone calls and I do emails and all this. If you could do that with generative AI, and it would come back with analysis, footnoted so you know where the information is, that is an enormous time saver. And frankly, it's a game changer if you're talking to a client and say, oh yeah, we've done 5 of these lease agreements just like that. Do you want to talk to Sally who does those for us? I can get her on the phone for you tomorrow. Most firms today could not do that like I just described, but generative AI applied in an enterprise setting offers enormous promise. So that's where we're working toward. How do we put this generative AI capability? And I give the Microsoft team enormous credit. They didn't think of this yesterday. They were working with the OpenAI guys since 2010, I believe. They saw this coming, so to speak. And the speed, back to the topic we were talking about earlier, the speed at which they've been able to say, okay, I'm going to bring out Copilot, I'm going to show you how to use this within your applications, is absolutely remarkable. We've been working with the OpenAI team to talk about how do we adapt the generative AI onto our applications. And as you might imagine, these guys, everybody, we had a bunch of CIOs from the legal industry in Redmond a few weeks ago, and their eyes were this big looking at the opportunity that this presents.
I've said many times that the C-suite is on fire with this, with the possibility of this technology. And, your niche in this market seems perfectly suited for it. And so, all the foundational work that you did ahead of time that you've been doing all along as your company has evolved, kind of positioned you sort of perfectly to then, exploit the next evolutionary step of this technology for this market segment. It's fascinating.
I'd like to say, as the chief strategy officer, I saw it all coming. But to your point, we have been building, and our presence in the market has put us in an enormous position. We've been seeing AI coming for a while, but I don't think any of us would have imagined how quickly the narrative changed on this, and how quickly people. I think the thing that was amazing about ChatGPT was it was one of those moments where everybody got it. It was like, oh, I see how to use that. And, I've been around Silicon Valley now for 30 years, and some stuff just comes and goes. I mean, I personally have always been a little bit skeptical about the broader use cases around blockchain. I think it's got some very specific use cases. I'm a bit skeptical about the metaverse. Maybe I'm a little too old to really get it, but I'm a bit skeptical. But this is one where I think when you talk with most people in the industry, as soon as they saw it, they go, "That's different. That's gonna change the game."
Yeah, there was no hesitation. There was, Microsoft jumped in with both boots, and for a change, Google had to scurry to catch up. Mean, they were working in this space, but all of a sudden, yikes!
Yeah, we're behind.
Yeah, all of a sudden we're behind. So, you have any concerns about generative AI going forward? I mean, it seems like perfectly suited for the industries that you serve. Any worries?
Absolutely. I think anybody who's looked at this will realize a few things. First off, I would recommend everybody who's thinking about using this in an enterprise setting to talk to your Microsoft rep and make sure you're doing it within your Azure tenant, because if you're professionals, and I suspect there are many, 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 many professionals who are putting prompts into ChatGPT that have confidential information in it that's getting uploaded into OpenAI.
Yeah.
You should be very nervous about that. I'm being very frank with you. The good news is if you go work with Microsoft and you do that in your tenant, they've architected it in a way that your prompt isn't going up into the cloud. And I think if I were a CIO, I would be, and a lot of people want to let people be free and go do things. This is one where I think you want to keep an eye on how you don't want to put a client merger agreement into ChatGPT to be able to go look at clauses and stuff like that, which would be a great use case for when you should go pursue without knowing that where that data is going to go. So I think that's number one. I think the second one, I heard a term when we were up in Redmond that was an interesting one where they said that ChatGPT hallucinates from time to time.
Yep.
And I thought, wow, I'm pretty sure I don't want any of my employees hallucinating. And I'm pretty sure I don't want my technology hallucinating. And it's just the reality of the technology at the stage of evolution we're at, that it doesn't get everything perfect. And it does a lot of things really well. And if you understand what it's doing and understand, it's a great first start for me. But, as someone famously said, trust but verify. I really think that the worry I have is that a partner or an associate is going to take this information as it's the answer. A little bit like I felt about Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia because it gives me a great starting point. I do knowledge discovery, but it may not always be exactly right because it's crowdsourced. Well, this has a slightly different problem. It may not be exactly right because it might hallucinate. It may make some stuff up, and it may not get everything right. And so I do think that the figuring out how to navigate and make sure we keep it in the use cases within the professional environment that we can trust the information it has, and it has the capability to footnote where that came from, so I can go verify that I feel good about that. So it's not that it's not capable, and I don't think we should view it as a limiter for us using the technology. But like any other good technology, make sure you understand what its limits are and what it can and can't do, and when it may or may not get you into harm's way.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Mark, that's sort of all the time we have for this episode of Redmond Magazine Vendor Spotlight. Many thanks to my guest, Mark Holman, Chief Strategy Officer at Intapp, for a fascinating conversation. And thanks to Intapp for making this conversation possible. Thank you, Mark.
John, that was great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and hope your listeners and users enjoy it as well.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.